The recording studio at Electric Lady in New York City had seen its share of legendary moments since Jimi Hendrix built it in 1970. Prince had recorded there, David Bowie, The Clash. But what happened on a Tuesday afternoon in March 2019 became one of those stories that studio engineers still talk about in hushed, almost reverent tones. Madonna was in Studio A, working on what would eventually become tracks for her Madame X album. With her was Rick Morrison, a legendary music producer who'd worked with everyone from Aretha Franklin to Beyoncé. He had a reputation for being brutally honest, for not caring about egos or feelings, only about the music. That's why Madonna had asked him to collaborate. She wanted someone who would push her, challenge her, make her better. But what started as creative tension turned into something else entirely when Rick made a comment he would regret for the rest of his career. A comment that Madonna would answer in the most devastating, perfect way possible. The session had been going for about 3 hours. Madonna was in the vocal booth, running through takes of a new song called Crave. It was a vulnerable, stripped-down track. Just her voice, minimal production, raw emotion. Rick was in the control room with the sound engineer, adjusting levels, making notes, doing his perfectionist thing. After the 5th take, Rick's voice came through the talkback speaker into Madonna's headphones. "Let's try that again," he said. "And this time, can you give me something more real? Less processed. I feel like I'm hearing the Madonna machine, not Madonna the artist." Madonna, who'd been doing this for 40 years and had sold over 300 million records, took a breath and said, "What exactly do you mean by that, Rick?" There was a pause. The sound engineer, a young guy named Marcus, looked uncomfortable. He'd worked with Rick before and knew that tone in his voice, the one that meant he was about to say something inflammatory. "Look," Rick said, leaning into the talkback mic, "you're an icon. Nobody's questioning that. But let's be honest here. Your voice has always been about production, autotune, layering, effects. When was the last time you just sang something raw? When was the last time you proved you could actually sing without all the technology holding you up?" The studio went dead silent. Marcus stopped moving entirely, his hand frozen over the mixing board. The 2 other musicians in the room, a guitarist and a keyboard player, exchanged wide-eyed glances. Madonna stood in the vocal booth, looking through the glass at Rick with an expression that was impossible to read. "You think I can't sing without autotune?" she said. "I think," Rick said, apparently committed to this collision course, "that you've built an incredible career on knowing how to use technology to enhance what you've got. There's no shame in that. But if we're being real, I've never heard you do a perfect take with just your voice and nothing else. No one has. Because you can't." What Rick Morrison didn't know, what he couldn't have known, because Madonna had never told this story publicly, was that before she was Madonna the pop icon, she'd trained at the University of Michigan with Christopher Flynn, a demanding voice teacher who'd studied under classical masters. She'd spent 2 years doing vocal exercises, learning proper technique, building a foundation that she'd deliberately hidden under layers of pop production, because that's what sold records. She'd made a choice early in her career: be respected by vocal purists or be the biggest pop star in the world. She'd chosen pop, and for 40 years, she'd let people like Rick assume that meant she couldn't really sing. But standing in that vocal booth, listening to a man who'd worked with actual vocal powerhouses tell her she was basically a manufactured product, Madonna made a different choice. "Okay," she said calmly. "Let's test your theory." She took off her headphones and set them down. Then she walked out of the vocal booth and into the control room. Rick looks confused. "What are you doing?" "Marcus," Madonna said to the engineer, "turn everything off. All the effects, all the processing, all the autotune plugins, everything. I want a completely dry signal." Marcus looked at Rick, who shrugged. Marcus started clicking through the digital audio workstation, bypassing every plugin, every effect, every bit of processing. Within a minute, the signal chain was completely bare, just the microphone feeding directly into the recording interface with nothing in between. "Now," Madonna said, "I need you to do one more thing." She reached up to the studio's main vocal microphone, a vintage Neumann U87 that cost about $3,500. And before anyone could stop her, she yanked the windscreen off and deliberately damaged the pop filter, creating a scenario where even the basic protection against harsh consonants was compromised. "Madonna, what the hell?" Rick started. "You said I need technology to sound good," Madonna interrupted. "So let's take away the technology. Let's take away the perfect microphone setup. Let's take away everything except my voice and see what happens." She walked back into the vocal booth, but she didn't put the headphones back on. She didn't position herself at the optimal distance from the microphone. She just stood there, about 3 feet back from the mic, in the worst possible position for recording vocals. "What song do you want to hear?" she asked. Rick, now looking slightly less confident, said, "I don't understand what you're trying to prove here." "Pick a song," Madonna said. "Any song, your choice, and I'll sing it right now, one take, with none of your precious technology. Then you can tell me if I can sing or not." Rick thought for a moment. If he was going to call her bluff, he might as well go all the way. "Ave Maria," he said. "Schubert's Ave Maria, classical piece, requires serious vocal technique, no room to hide behind pop melodies." Marcus looked like he wanted to disappear into the floor. The guitarist quietly pulled out his phone, sensing that something important was about to happen and wanting to record it. Madonna nodded once. "Ave Maria, one take, no technology. Are you recording?" Marcus hit the record button, his hand actually shaking. What happened in the next 4 minutes and 30 seconds is something that Marcus would later describe as the most humbling musical experience of his life. Madonna closed her eyes and began to sing. The first note that came out of her mouth made Rick Morrison sit up straighter in his chair. It was pure, clear, and completely controlled, the kind of tone that only comes from years of proper classical training. No breathiness, no pop affectation, no Madonna-isms at all. Just a perfectly placed, technically flawless vocal tone. She moved through the Latin lyrics with the kind of precision that suggested she'd not only learned the song, but understood every word. Her vibrato was controlled and intentional, appearing exactly where it should in classical style. Her breathing was invisible. You couldn't hear her take a breath, even though the microphone setup was terrible and should have picked up every mouth sound. And she was singing it from memory, in Latin, with classical vocal technique, 3 feet back from a damaged microphone setup, with zero effects or processing. Rick's face went from skeptical to confused to stunned in the span of about 30 seconds. By the time Madonna hit the high note in the bridge, a pure, sustained B-flat that she held for 6 seconds without a waver, he had his head in his hands. Marcus was crying, actually crying. The guitarist had his phone up, recording, his mouth hanging open. When Madonna finished the final note and opened her eyes, the control room was completely silent. She looked through the glass at Rick, her expression neutral. "Do you need another take?" she asked, "or was that real enough for you?" Rick Morrison, a man who'd produced hundreds of records and worked with 3 generations of artists, couldn't speak. He literally could not form words. Madonna walked back into the control room and sat down next to him. "I trained classically," she said, her voice quiet now. 2 years at the University of Michigan, voice, dance, theater. My teacher Christopher Flynn used to make me sing Puccini arias until my throat hurt. He said if I could master classical technique, I could do anything with my voice. She paused, looking at the mixing board. "When I started making pop records, I made a choice. I could try to be taken seriously by people like you, prove I had classical chops, fight to be respected as a real vocalist. Or I could do what actually connected with people. Be fun, be provocative, be pop. Use production creatively, because that's what the genre is about." Rick finally found his voice. I had no idea. I've worked in this industry for 30 years, and I had no idea you could sing like that. That was kind of the point, Madonna said. I didn't need you to know. I didn't need anyone to know. But I need you to understand something, Rick. When you say I can't sing without autotune, you're not critiquing my voice. You're critiquing your own assumptions. You assumed that because I make pop music, because I use production creatively, that must mean I'm hiding something, that I need technology because I'm not good enough without it. She stood up and looked directly at him. I don't need the technology. I choose it. There's a difference. Marcus, who'd finally stopped crying, spoke up for the first time. That's the most incredible vocal performance I've ever recorded, and I've worked sessions with everyone. Do you know what you just did? I sang a song, Madonna said simply. No, Marcus said, shaking his head. You sang a technically demanding classical piece, from memory, in Latin, with perfect technique, in one take, with a deliberately compromised recording setup. Do you understand how impossible that is? I've had opera singers in here who couldn't do that. The guitarist, who'd been quiet this whole time, finally spoke. I got it on video, the whole thing. Is it okay if I— No, Madonna said immediately. Then she softened. Actually, you know what? Send it to Rick. Just Rick. Not social media, not YouTube. Let him decide what to do with it. She picked up her bag and headed for the door. Where are you going? Rick asked. We have 4 more hours booked. Madonna stopped at the door and turned back. I think we're done for today. You need some time to think about whether you actually want to collaborate with me or whether you just want to work with your assumptions about me. When you figure out which one it is, call me. She left. The studio was silent for a full minute after the door closed. Rick Morrison sat in the producer's chair, staring at nothing. Finally, he said to Marcus, "Play it back." Marcus played back the Ave Maria recording. In the completely dry, unprocessed signal, Madonna's voice was even more impressive. Every tiny detail of her technique was visible. The way she shaped vowels, the precise control of her vibrato, the effortless power in her upper register. The video that the guitarist had taken started making rounds in the music industry within 24 hours, though it never went fully public. It was sent person to person, producer to producer, engineer to engineer. People who'd worked with Madonna for years were shocked. Music industry veterans who'd spent careers assuming her vocals were smoke and mirrors were forced to reconsider everything they thought they knew. Rick Morrison called Madonna 3 days later. The conversation was short. I was wrong, he said. Completely, arrogantly wrong, and I'm sorry. I know, Madonna said. But apologies are easy. What are you going to do about it? I'd like to finish the album, Rick said, if you'll still work with me, but on your terms, however you want to use your voice, with production, without it, anything. I'll never question it again. That's not good enough, Madonna said. I don't need you to stop questioning. I need you to stop assuming. There's a difference. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to finish this album, and we're going to make it exactly the way I want to make it. And every time you think, this would sound better with less autotune, or this is too produced, I want you to remember that I can do it any way I want. The production isn't a crutch. It's a choice. I understand, Rick said. Do you? Because this isn't about me proving myself to you. I already did that. This is about you understanding that just because you don't hear someone's full range doesn't mean it's not there. How many other artists have you underestimated because you made assumptions about their process? Rick was quiet for a long time. Probably a lot. Yeah, Madonna said. Probably. They finished the album over the next 6 weeks. Rick Morrison, to his credit, never questioned another creative choice Madonna made. He learned to see production not as a mask, but as a tool, not as compensation for weakness, but as an extension of artistry. The story of what happened in Studio A that March afternoon became legendary in certain circles. Marcus told it at audio engineering conferences, always careful not to reveal too much, always ending with the same point. Never assume you know the limits of someone's ability just because they choose not to show you everything they can do. The guitarist's video stayed private, shown only to a select few who needed to learn the lesson that Rick had learned. Madonna never performed Ave Maria publicly, never released that recording, never used it to prove anything to anyone. She didn't need to. But something changed in how the music industry talked about Madonna after that. The whispers of "she can't really sing" dried up among the people who mattered, the people who actually understood vocal technique and production. They'd seen the proof, or heard about it from someone who had, and they knew. Rick Morrison, in interviews years later, would always pause when asked about working with Madonna on Madame X. "It was humbling," he'd say. "She taught me more about artistry in 4 minutes than I'd learned in 30 years. She taught me that choosing simplicity when you could do complexity, that's mastery. Choosing production when you could go acoustic, that's confidence. She didn't need to prove she could strip everything away, but she did it anyway, to teach me a lesson I badly needed to learn." The lesson was simple. Never mistake someone's artistic choices for their limitations. Never assume that what you see is all there is. And never ever tell Madonna she can't sing without autotune. Because she can. She just doesn't need to prove it to you. There's a recording somewhere, locked in a vault at Electric Lady Studios, of Madonna singing Schubert's Ave Maria with perfect classical technique, in one take, with a deliberately compromised microphone setup and zero processing. Only a handful of people have heard it. Rick Morrison has a copy. He keeps it on his phone and reportedly listens to it whenever he's about to work with a new artist, as a reminder not to confuse the package with the product, the choice with the capability. Marcus, the engineer, left that session and started a blog about respecting artists' processes. His first post was titled "The Day I Learned to Stop Assuming." And Madonna? She went on making exactly the kind of music she wanted to make, with exactly the amount of production she wanted to use, secure in the knowledge that she had nothing left to prove to anyone. The greatest artists don't need to show you everything they can do. They just need to know they can do it. The rest of us need to learn the difference between can't and choose not to. That's what Madonna taught everyone in Studio A that Tuesday afternoon. She didn't just prove she could sing without technology. She proved that assuming someone needs technology because they use it is the real ignorance. If you've ever been underestimated because of your choices, if you've ever had someone assume your tools were crutches, if you've ever had to prove yourself to someone who should have known better, this story is for you. Subscribe for more stories about the moments when artists stopped playing nice and started proving points. Share this with someone who needs to remember that using technology doesn't mean you need it. And leave a comment about a time when you had to show someone what you were really capable of, just to shut down their assumptions. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is break the microphone and sing anyway.